You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 12th Doctor story, Sleep No More. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or watch us on the StarQuest YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications of new episodes. I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest network you are sure to enjoy called Let's Science. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science. So this week we are, as I mentioned, talking about Sleep No More, which is not the story of my week at Scout Summer Camp last week, but this 12th Doctor story called featuring the Doctor and Clara. And Jimmy, I will turn it over to you for a recap.
This week we get a found footage episode as the 12th Doctor and Clara come to a space station orbiting Neptune in the 38th century. Also arriving on the space station is a rescue party from the Indo-Japanese government. They're here to rescue the space station's crew, but the only member of it they find is Dr. Gagan Rasmussen, who has invented a process called Morpheus that lets you get a full night's sleep in just 5 minutes. Unfortunately, as a byproduct of the process, it generates an excessive amount of eye boogers, and the eye boogers then conglomerate into carnivorous humanoid monsters and start killing people, which is what happened to all of the crew except Dr. Rasmussen. And now the eye booger monsters start attacking the rescue crew and the Doctor and Clara, so we're treated to another episode inspired by the movie Alien, as people run around in a dark, unlit space facility being killed off one by one. Eventually, Rasmussen tells the Doctor that he's in league with the eye booger monsters and wants them to spread and destroy all human life because they represent the future. To stop him, the Doctor destroys the space station, but he's puzzled and says the situation doesn't make sense, and he, Clara, and the single survivor from the rescue team escape in the TARDIS. The situation finally does make sense, though, when what appears to be Dr. Rasmussen appears in a post-TARDIS message, revealing that the real Matt Rasmussen is dead, and it was eye boogers impersonating him the whole time. Further, they've embedded a code in the video you've just watched that will turn you, your family, and everyone you know into eye booger monsters. Sweet dreams.
All right. Now it's time for our overall impression of this episode. Father Cory, you get to start.
It was an episode of Doctor Who. This was one of these that I've really never liked. It's just because it's as Jimmy said, it's a lot of running around in corridors and hiding in freezers and hiding in rooms, and the idea of the Morpheus being, this thing that can simulate sleep in 5 minutes. Interesting idea. Beyond that, it's a episode of Doctor Who.
Okay. Jimmy, how about you?
I liked it better. I know that this episode is divisive. A lot of people don't like it, but I thought it was fine. I liked the visual storytelling technique they used. It's different than what we normally get to have this found footage approach. It's complex in that we're drawing from a bunch of different video sources, and that adds interest to me to it. This episode is written by Mark Gatiss, and while I like Mark Gatiss's work on some things, I'm not really a fan of what he writes for Doctor Who. His episodes typically are very nostalgia focused, and he's even got some of that here with the Mr. Sandman song that keeps coming up. That's the big element of nostalgia in this. But unlike most of his episodes, which are set in the past, you think about things like the Red Horror or whatever it was, which set in 19th century England, and Princess of Mars, also set in in the 19th century. Here we got a futuristic episode, and I think lifting Gatiss out of his historical nostalgia and plopping him in the future resulted in a better script from him. This episode is obviously inspired by Alien, but it's still more interesting, and I like the character development and the interpersonal dynamics of the different guest characters that we meet. and I enjoyed it overall. It's not the greatest episode of Doctor Who, but I enjoyed it.
I guess I tend more toward Father Cory's assessment. I didn't really like this one much the first time we discussed it, and my estimation didn't go up a lot. I agree with Jimmy. I like the found footage elements, and there's a few clever gimmicks where if you're paying attention, you start to notice certain things that the Doctor eventually calls out, like about the cameras and all that sort of stuff. But I found it confusing a little bit. Like, what's, when the Doctor's at the end is saying this makes no sense, that's a bad sign for the viewer.
Yeah.
At least for me. I just felt like, yeah, I agree with the Doctor. This makes no sense. Because in the end, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but in the end, it's sort of like, and so if the Doctor and Clara had never showed up, what would be different? And maybe nothing, or probably the one soldier who survives wouldn't have. But
yeah, they wouldn't be in it. But other than that, I mean, what the reveal is that the whole thing has been staged, and the iBookers wanted a story that they could show people that would be compelling enough to get them to watch and absorb the signal that will turn them into iBookers. And so everything we see is being staged managed by the iBookers. And so they wanted to tell a compelling thriller narrative to get people to watch it. And so they basically ripped off the movie Alien, possibly having seen it from their own historical files.
And I get there's like a meta level of this where, Gatiss and Moffat are like kind of tweaking the audience because they made us watch this thing of which is literally telling us through the screen that it was a trick on us, the audience, in a sense that we're now infected, which is, it kind of evokes a little bit of Blink for me, the whole idea of that's a kind of a characteristic of both Moffat and Gatiss, who are writing partners.
Well,
so I kind of can respect that. That was a bit fun.
Well, you're talking about Blink too, especially once they develop the angels, where even just an angel on a TV screen can become an angel, things like that.
Right.
Yeah. Also, this continues a theme in Doctor Who, which is especially prominent in Stephen Moffat's time, of something utterly non-horrifying becoming horrifying. In this case, the eye boogers that you rub out of your eye. Now, those are the villain. And you're infected with them, and they're going to eat you. And so it's a horrification of the ordinary. I also liked this episode in that it's the first one since the time of the first Doctor, at least according to TARDIS Wikia, where the villain wins. The Doctor and Clara and the survivor run away at the end. They bravely turn their tail and flee. And
brains are rubbing.
Exactly. and so it's nice to see the Doctor not triumph for once. We don't have an arrogant 12th Doctor, I'm so cool, you're so inferior speech at the end. He's just running away. And it's nice to see that, because there are a lot of situations, a lot of stories where running away would be the logical thing to do, and they don't do it. But here they do. Also, just as a point of interest, the station they're on is called La Verrier Station, and that's a reference to the French mathematician Urbain Le Verrier, who in the 1800s used gravity to predict where Neptune would be found. So it's a fitting tribute to him that the space station at Neptune is named after him.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
One thing I liked that was kind of subtle, you talked about the found footage and the different angles they used. The angles they used were all people, either they're like free floating from different perspectives of the station, or people who had done the Morpheus. So there was never a camera from the Doctor's view, and there was never a camera from Chopra, the soldier, who didn't use Morpheus.
Right.
So it was always somebody else that they were doing it from. And that was a great way to do it. But just that little subtle thing of, you never saw Clara from Doctor's view, for example, at any point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because, that was the thing. And then when it was outside of them, it was all like, as the Doctor says, it's that, eye dust or, whatever, eye boogers, free float,
dust, the dust you saw.
Shed.
Yeah. The dust you saw floating in the air. There's always the scenes where there's a little bit of light. You always saw little flecks of dust floating in the air.
Right. That bit was was subtle. I liked it. I like when they're subtle with these things and you have to pay attention and notice. I do like that aspect of this.
There's also a callback in this to the Great Catastrophe, which has been mentioned before in Doctor Who. Mark Gatiss, now there's a mention. I mean, there's a Great Catastrophe that occurs where Doctor Who's out of chronological order, but where we meet it is at the beginning of Tom Baker's tenure, where they go to space station Nerva that has been put in orbit to help humanity survive, and apparently there were intense solar flares there. Also, in the Fifth Doctor's time, the Fifth Doctor actually starts to refer to the Great Catastrophe and cuts himself off because he's upsetting Tegan, who doesn't want to know about a great catastrophe, kind of like Clara's like, what great catastrophe? But it was like the Earth is about to smash into the sun or something like that. And here the Doctor refers to the great catastrophe and then doesn't elaborate to Clara's annoyance. But he says that there was a bit of a reconfiguration on Earth afterwards, and now India and Japan have kind of merged, and you can imagine how traumatic that would be. Yeah. But there's also an allusion in the Fourth Doctor story, The Talons of Weng Chiang, which touches on, even though it's set in the 19th century, it touches on events in the future. And we hear about an Icelandic alliance that is rescued at the Battle of Reykjavik by the Filipino army. And it's like, okay, Iceland and the Philippines are kind of on opposite sides of the planet. So how does that work?
Right. So, speaking of the Doctor also not being, omnipotent or, the standing astride the universe, there is a moment where he asks Clara to take his hand and she says, "I'm not afraid." And he says, "I am." When he held my hand. I thought that was another element of that. The Doctor, Clara asked the Doctor when in the beginning when they're there. I like this moment. She sees the Japanese and Indian decorations on the wall, and she thinks, "Oh, have you brought me to a space restaurant?" And he calls her out like, people don't say that. They don't call it space things. It's not a space. They just call it a restaurant.
Yeah, he talks about. I took notes on that. Where is it? He talks about a space restaurant. No one calls it a space restaurant or space champagne or space hats. And then immediately Clara says, "What about a spacesuit?" And he says, "Pedant." And and then the commander of the rescue party, Chief Nagata, refers to space pirates. And Clara is like, "Okay, space pirates."
I love that additional little bit. The space pirates thing was great, and which calls out the fact that throughout, especially classic Who, they're always calling things like space lasers and space restaurants and space whatever. So I do love that. Nobody calls it that, except they always did. So that was one of my favorite bits.
And sometime in real life.
Yeah, right.
We do have space stations and spacesuits.
Yes, we do. So a couple of interesting ethical things come up. One of them is the grunts. And apparently, so 474 is a grunt, which means humans that are bred to be soldiers, and they're bred to be not intelligent. And this is a sort of horrific dystopian futuristic thing, that people being treated like things. I like the way they handled it, though. This is essentially a form of slavery, and it's worse than regular slavery because it's eugenic slavery. Where people are bred for their role and deliberately have certain characteristics enhanced, and worse, deliberately have certain characteristics diminished. But I like that Clara is horrified by it, and the Doctor just says that's how they roll in the 38th century. And that's the kind of attitude you would have to take as a time traveler. If you travel to the past, like say the Roman Empire, where lots of the population are slaves, or the future where you've got grunts, or any other period where people are being systematically abused, you're not going to be able to fix every social problem, and you just kind of have to accept it and move in the situation if you're going to save people and not
constantly 13th Doctor, take note, harp on all the injustices you can't fix.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Or it's apropos going to, the pre-civil rights era South or antebellum, the United States, whatever. Right.
Mhm.
You'd have to just accept this is the way things are here and now. They're not going to change by my little efforts. And I can say that it's wrong, but it's not going to change anything.
You can do what good you can in the time for everybody, but there are some things you just can't fix, and you'd have to accept that as a time traveler.
Yep.
Right. But it is,
just like Barbara had to in the Aztecs.
Right. Exactly. And I do like that it kind of calls out without, standing on a soapbox and moralizing the grunts, and it's Gatiss makes it clear this is what's going on. This is bad. It also shows that the grunts are, at least this particular one, 474, is more than she's made to be, that she actually has the ability to feel things and whatnot beyond, and has a heroic sacrifice.
She does. She's 474 is a great character, and she and Chopra, who is the one that doesn't use the Morpheus project, and he's portrayed as kind of a political dissident. He's not going along with a lot of the things in society, and he doesn't like what's being done to the grunts, apparently, or something like that. But one of the things that they establish is 474, who's female, is attracted to him. And he doesn't want anything to do with her at first, but over the course of them surviving this disaster on the space station together, they come to respect each other. I mean, she still thinks he's pretty, that's what she says. And so she's attracted to him, but he comes to respect her, and she ends up saving his butt, at least for a time. And she performs this act of self-sacrifice, and you have this nice reconciliation, of the two of them. And I really like both of their individual character arcs and how they interact together.
The other big moral question in this episode is the Morpheus pod itself, and the idea of, getting rid of sleep so that we can, work more. I mean, that's total corporate speak, right? Oh, wouldn't you love to get rid of sleep so you can work for the man even more hours a day?
They don't put it like that. They put it in terms of, so you can get an edge on your competitor.
Exactly.
Right.
And okay, so here the Doctor does get preachy, and he starts waxing poetic about the value of sleep and so forth, and how horrific it is that you're trying to do away with it. And actually, if Morpheus worked and didn't generate eye boogers that would cannibalize you, I'd be okay with it. We do need sleep because of our biological limitations, and that's true of every organism on Earth, even if it's not sleep in a human sense. We talked about this in the Mystery of Sleep episode of Mysterious World. But even primitive organisms go through phases that are like sleep, and that they become less active and more active. But if, and this is the if you had a process that lets you be just fine with less sleep, I'd be okay with that. But the problem is Morpheus doesn't do that.
No.
Right.
Well, and the Doctor even points out that Time Lords sleep, and Clara's surprised. You do? I do it when you're not around.
Or when you're not looking.
When you're not looking.
Well, and that's the thing is I think, Morpheus as a concept of if we could be perfectly fine with less sleep, I would be okay. And it's the corporate speak way of framing this. They never phrase it as to make your life better, more fulfilled, to have more time with your family. They phrase it as to work more, and so it's kind of, it kind of betrays itself a little bit there. The writing does.
I also like the way they introduce this, that rather than have a character explain it, they essentially play a recording of a woman who works, I guess, for the Morpheus Corporation or whatever runs this. And she's a very attractive woman. We only see her head, but her head appears as a hologram. She describes what Morpheus is. She describes its benefits. And then she says, so, you can use the process. And slip into the arms of Morpheus, and then the head vanishes, and then it immediately reappears and says, terms and conditions apply.
That was great.
They still got lawyers in the 38th century. That's
yeah. Well, if it's a corporate government, lawyers are probably one of the most important groups of the
right
culture.
So we mentioned that there were clues sprinkled throughout to give us hints of what's really going on, and we have that found footage aspect from the beginning. We think
it's not an aspect; it's the whole episode is found footage.
Well, that's what I mean. But the part of the episode, the aspect of the production of it, is like we are led to believe, or we are led to assume from the beginning, that the soldiers have helmet cams, because we are familiar with soldiers having helmet cams. So it plays off of our assumptions that we can make with these sorts of things.
Well, we even see it doing like facial recognition, where it scans the face and shows who the person is and all the information about them and everything.
Exactly. And then I think for me, the first clue that something wonky was going on was when Clara comes out of the Morpheus pod, and suddenly we're seeing the video from her point of view, which should be impossible because she doesn't have a helmet cam. And then we start to roll out more and more cues. Nagata at one point sort of says, well, we don't have helmet cams. And the doctor just
and that's when the penny drops.
It. Yeah. He comes back to it.
He comes back. What did you say? And Nagata is, 1.86 minutes ago. What did you say? We don't have helmet cams.
Right. And then, of course, the big one was Rasmussen is narrating this thing from the beginning. But then we see him get eaten by the booger monster and booger monster and the boogeyman. And the booger and it's like, but yet he's continuing. And then later on, he's like, oh, yeah, you saw me get eaten. Well, and he kind of is very coy about it. But
spoiler, I'm not dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm dead, not dead. Yeah.
So I did like that slow reveal of, and encouraging you to pick up on things as you went along.
Now, I mentioned that this episode is inspired by the movie Alien, but there's also another movie that it's inspired by, or at least appears to me to be inspired by. And it's a deep cut. And so I really appreciated it. But this is a visual reference that you won't get if you're not a fan of cheesy B movies. So the form that the eye booger monsters take when they conglomerate, it's a sort of goopy humanoid form. It looks kind of like a melted human, except it's got this enormous mouth that just hangs open, and it's appropriate. It looks like a yawn. It looks like as they're lumbering towards you, it looks like the sleep monsters are just yawning constantly. Their mouths are just frozen in this yawn position that's enormous. It's inhumanly enormous yawn. And these creatures therefore look like the monsters from the 1960s movie Attack of the Eye Creatures. And I'm sure it was meant to be Attack of the Eye Creatures, but this movie is so low budget that in the movie's title, it says Attack of the Eye Creatures. And they look just like this. They're these blobby monsters that have this enormous yawn. And if you watch the Mystery Science Theater 3000 riff on it, Joel and the bots are constantly going whenever the eye creatures are on the screen.
And now half our audience has yawned out of sympathetic yawning.
I regret the day I taught my kids how to do that. One of the interesting things about this is these are soldiers running around, and they have these enormous rifles, this very aliens-esque rifles, and yet they never fire the rifles until the very end, but they never shoot at the monsters. I thought that was a kind of an interesting choice, and I'm not sure why. Because
they totally win. They're just eye boogers. You could totally blow them apart. In fact, they do things that end up, like they close a door on one of them as it's sticking its arm through, and the arm just disintegrates.
Yep.
Right. But, from within the story, diegetically, like, why wouldn't they ever shoot at them? They just never shoot at them.
They would. This is a writing flaw.
Yeah, yeah. That's until the very end when Nagata shoots Rasmussen in the back, or
Well, and then we see how ineffective that actually is, because it doesn't actually kill him; he just pretends.
Right. At what point did Rasmussen become one of the Sandmen? Was it before the episode even began?
Yeah,
from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was found in the Morpheus box as one already.
He's the Leonard Nimoy from Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right.
So, by the way, speaking of Rasmussen, I didn't recognize him, but he was played by Reese Shearsmith. Try that again. Reese Shearsmith, who played the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, in Adventure of Space and Time.
He's got that one scene at the end.
Yeah, he was when they had the handoff scene.
Right.
I didn't recognize him, though, because, of course, different hair and everything. But
yeah.
He's not wearing a Beatles mop top in this.
Nope.
So, in the end, Jimmy, as you said, this is one of those ones where the villain wins. So, does the signal get out? Does the 38th century Indo-Japanese Empire get infected?
We're led to believe that it does, but we're never told, because this is a one-off. Unlike everything else in this season, this is a one-shot story. It's not a two-parter. Yeah. And Mark Gatiss planned to write a sequel to this the next season. But since Stephen Moffat was leaving, Gatiss realized that he probably wouldn't be writing for the show anymore after that, because, new broom sweeps clean. And so he decided to write Empress of Mars instead.
Right. That was the next season. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was trying to put all that together because that was with Bill. I was trying to remember that was with Bill. Okay.
And Alpha Centauri.
And right. I did like the doctor's quoting of Macbeth in this one, which was where we get the title of the episode, Sleep No More. The sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labors both, balm of hurt minds, chief nourisher in life's great feast. I think I had a way with words, you know what I mean? So
he's still better in the original Klingon.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one thing that, now I've been largely positive on this episode, but one thing that I think is, I'll criticize this aspect of it. At one point, the Doctor realizes that the eye creatures, now that I've explained that reference, I can call them that, because that's where they come from. At one point, the Doctor deduces that the eye creatures cannot see. And we're later given an explanation of this, sorta, which is that the Sandman can't see because their visual receptors have been hijacked by the transmissions from the dust floating in the atmosphere. That makes no sense to me. And whatever Gatiss was trying to explain, they needed to dwell on it more, because the explanation went by too fast and was too underdeveloped, and it didn't make any sense to me.
I guess, in the end, it wasn't even a correct explanation, because it was all, they were pretending to be blind,
maybe
because Rasmussen was in on it, and they were trying to create a dramatic story. So
one could certainly look at it that way, but if you got little cameras floating through the atmosphere in the form of floating eye boogers, then when they conglomerate, they should still be able to see. So it didn't make any sense to me.
It did not. Yeah, and it shouldn't have made sense to the Doctor as he said it. That's for sure. Okay. Any other notes on this one, Father Cory?
One thing they kind of did is just something a little bit different, is they didn't have the traditional title screen. The traditional TARDIS floating through the clock's title screen for this era. Instead, they showed list of names and serial numbers and things like that of all the people that were on the station. And then it highlights Doctor Who within the list.
Which also intersects with Clara Oswald.
Yep.
They show it as a piece of, because Gagan has been doing an introduction for us to the found footage, which is itself found footage. So we have a found footage flashback within a found footage narrative. And he's talking about the process and the coding, and he's pulling together these video sources, and we see this flash of computer code on the screen that has all these relevant words embedded in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of a unique way to do it, and again, instead of the traditional opening sequence.
It's also much shorter, which gives him a little more runtime to play with.
Yep. That's true. Yeah, and we don't ever actually get the title until the end credits of the episode.
Title of the episode, that's correct.
Yeah. Cool. Jimmy, any other notes?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we'll wrap things up there then. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Devin O., Thomas V., Michael B., Jonathan K., and Ronald B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is brought to you in part by Sam Castry Law, LLC, focusing on business and entertainment law in the greater Chicagoland area and intellectual property law across the U.S. Learn more by visiting castrylaw.com, CASTREE law.com. Licensed to practice in Illinois and before the United States Trademark Office. We'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. What did you think of Sleep No More? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there as well. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the second Doctor story, The Mind Robber. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and I'll see you in the land of fiction.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, Mr. Sandman, send me a dream, do-do-do-do.